I just built this cool little end table out of nothing but a couple of 2x4s. I want to show you how I did it, but to do that I need to take you back to the beginning. I'll be following the plans I've made, and you can get yours down below if you want to follow along with me. All you need are 4 8-foot 2x4s. Try to find the straightest ones you can. Don't be afraid to sight them down the edge like this. You're allowed to look weird in the lumber aisle. It also makes people think you know what you're doing. I'll be starting with the tabletop. First, I cut 6 pieces to 22 inches long. If you're using a circular saw, grab a speed square to help guide your cut. I've linked one in the video description if you don't have one. These things aren't too expensive and super handy to have in your shop for all sorts of things. If you have a table saw, you can clean up the 2x4s by running them through the table saw and removing a very thin sliver of material. This removes the rounded edges of the 2x4 and flattens the surfaces. It also makes sure all of your pieces are the same thickness. This is an optional detail that can make your 2x4s look a little less like framing materials and more like furniture grade wood. And here's a tip. Label your boards as you go. Even if they're the same size, labeling saves you from second guessing later. It also makes it easier to follow my plans. Now I'm going to glue up these 6 boards into one solid panel. When clamping, alternate the direction of the end grain. That'll help keep the panel flat and reduce cupping over time. Set the boards on end in your clamps. Then cover all the edges with an even coat of glue. Then clamp it tight, but not too tight. If you want to improve your glue up and reduce sanding later, use some scrap pieces of wood to keep the boards aligned. These are called cowls. Ideally, they would have a little bit of a bow in them to keep pressure in the middle further away from the clamps. If you see tons of glue squeezing out, don't panic. That just means you used a bit too much. We'll scrape that off later once it dries. While the top dries, let's make the legs. These are 20.5 inches long, and we're adding a light taper just to class things up. A jigsaw will totally work for this. Just mark your cut and use a steady hand to make the cut. Or if you've got a tapering jig for your table saw, boom, you're done. The tapering jig on your table saw is safer, faster, and more repeatable. Tapers are one of those small upgrades that make a huge difference on how professional your piece looks. If you want to build this tapering jig for yourself, I put a link to the plans down below. Next up, the table skirts. I want to mount my legs at a 45-degree angle to make the table a little more interesting. So I'll cut 4 boards at 16.5 inches with 45-degree miter cuts on both ends. If you're nervous about making these miter cuts with a circular saw, practice on a scrap piece first. And remember, always double check your measurement after a miter cut. That angle eats up more length than you think. You can always take more material off, but adding material is a little bit harder. While you can totally use your circular saw for this cut, if you have a miter saw, definitely use that. It'll be much faster, safer, and more accurate. Grab your pocket hole jig and drill holes for 2-inch pocket screws in the ends of the table skirts. This is how everything's going to connect later. This is a bit trickier at the miter cuts. I would suggest working with a scrap piece of wood until you get the screw holes perfect. And if you've never used a pocket hole jig before, welcome to the club. You're gonna love it. Just set your depth, clamp it, and go. Some master woodworkers frown upon pocket holes, but the truth is pocket holes are great for stuff like this, and they're simple and strong. Now go ahead and sand all the table base parts with 80 and then 120 grit sandpaper. It's easier to do most of the sanding before assembly. By the way, I'm fully aware that this Mercadero sander is very expensive, but it's so nice to use, I almost don't hate sanding. Now we can take all those parts and build the base. As I said before, my table has miter cuts in the skirts and angled table legs. While I love the look of this design, I quickly realized I made it much harder to screw in the pocket hole screws. Even with a clamp, the joint just kept slipping. I knew this would happen, but not to this extent. I found a way to make this a little easier. I used the wood glue and then pinned everything together with some brad nails on the top and bottom surfaces of the skirt where they wouldn't be visible later. These brad nails really reduced the amount of joint slip and allowed me to install the pocket hole screws. This assembly was a little trickier than I was hoping for. But I really like the final look of the angled legs, so to me, it was well worth it. If you guys got a better way to do this, please leave it in the comments. I'd love to know. Take your time here. Make sure your pieces are flush and square. A little patience now saves a lot of sanding later. Ask me how I know. Once the glue is dry, let's clean up this top. Trim the edges to 21 inches so it's nice and square. Your top may have a bit of a bow in it, that's fine. The base will straighten it out. A straight edge or track saw attachment helps here. Actually, I think it's easier and safer to do it this way than using a table saw. Once it's cut to size, sand it with 80 grit sandpaper. Set the base on top of your freshly trimmed tabletop. Center it up so you've got an even overhang on all sides. Now for something that will make your future self very happy. Tabletop expansion brackets. These let the top move with humidity and temperature changes so it doesn't crack. I've made the mistake of not using these in the past and it burned me. Then clamp it down to hold it in place and flatten out any bow in the top. If there is a bow in the top, it's best to have it bow away from the table in the middle. We'll be installing the brackets in the middle, so it will pull the bow in and keep the top nice and tight to the base. There are other versions of these, but I found these to be the simplest to install. Screw them in just snug, not tight. We want to allow the top to move just a touch if needed. If you're interested, I've linked these brackets down below. Now let's make it nice and silky smooth. Everything should have already been sanded to 80 grit, so now sand to 120 and finish with 220. If you want to take your project a step further, you can use a block plane to break all the sharp edges. This will make the edges look consistent and won't cut anyone. If you don't have a block plane, you could also break the sharp edges with a sanding block. If you have a router, you can also add some edge detail if you like. I like to just break the edge with a chamfer bit. I would suggest finishing with paint or stain. You can go rustic, modern, or natural. Your table, your style. I went kind of rustic with this one. So that's it. A clean custom end table from nothing but a couple of 2x4s and a weekend's worth of effort. If you made it this far in the video, you're awesome. And if you build one, tell me how it went in the comments. Hit like if this helped you out, subscribe for more DIY projects, and I'll see you in the next one. Now go make some sawdust.